So the Canadian polls are all showing that the Liberals are leading. I don't know if you believe that or not. The elections are coming in what, 2 weeks? April 28th. So yeah, basically 2 weeks. I think 2 weeks from today. And if you believe the polls, then you believe that it's almost a landslide victory for the Liberals again. But I call bullshit. I don't think this is true at all. I think they're doing the same thing they did in the States where they're trying to manipulate people into thinking that something's going on with the polls. The only thing that throws me off a little bit is the predictive markets, the people that are betting. And that's usually a better indicator of what's going on when you look at that. But uh, yeah, and there's a lot of betting as to the Liberals winning. So what's up, Joe? Yeah. So I don't know. Let's read this article. This is Politico, so don't expect much. They're just dog shit. Honestly, they're just complete garbage. But you gotta read garbage articles sometimes to see what they're saying on that side. What the polls in Canada are really saying. Conservatives in Canada could be forgiven for celebrating earlier this year. Their nemesis Justin Trudeau announced that he was resigning as prime minister, and polls showed they would romp to victory over the Liberals whenever the election was called. Except one longtime Canadian pollster soon began to see a different story. Beginning in January, Frank Graves started to notice a sudden and unexpected downward trend for the Conservatives. At the time, Graves was ridiculed online for his observations, especially because of his reputation as a Liberal supporter. But as Donald Trump talked more and more about tariffs and annexing Canada, Graves and the rest of the country watched as the Conservative Party's 25-point lead evaporated. Now Graves predicts a comfortable win for Mark Carney and his fellow Liberals. Again, bullshit. I call bullshit on that, but he's not wrong about the slip. There was a slip. I think the slip, some of what this article says is probably true. Some of it is just fresh face and people that are, that always want to vote Liberal no matter what. And we're just completely sick of Trudeau. Now seeing a new guy and they're like, fuck it, we're voting Liberal. So that's what I think that a lot of that slip is. This is unprecedented, Graves said in an interview with Politico magazine. I've never seen a transformation of one voter landscape in Canada of that nature. Ahead of the April 28th election, Graves explained how he detected the early stirrings of Conservatives' downfall and why Liberals were able to tap into the Canadian political zeitgeist in the new Trump era. So here's some of what the interview was. I'm not going to read it all because it goes on pretty long, but I'm going to touch a couple things here. So, question: you were one of the first people to detect the Conservatives' popularity might be fading in January. What were your surveys telling you, and what did you see that others didn't? We started seeing some movement at the beginning of this year. We had the Conservative Party with a 25-point lead, which is a massive lead in our system. At that point, we had the Liberals, who were the incumbent, at historic, at least in the 21st century, low of 19 points. Basically tied with the more left-leaning New Democratic Party at that point. Since then, we have seen a straight line movement. It's been interrupted, plateaued a bit in the last few weeks. At this point, it just can't keep going up. The 25-point lead was erased. Now, nobody else saw that, so I faced a lot of skepticism and criticism. Conservatives were unhappy to see a race that looked like it could just sip beer and cut the engines and cruise to a majority, and all of a sudden I see this narrowing. The Liberals, in my latest numbers, they would get a massive 200-seat majority. Yeah, right. Now I think there'll probably be a little fallback, but they'll have a big cushion. This is unprecedented. I've never seen a transformation of our voter landscape in Canada of that nature. This isn't well known, but we have been assembling data on a daily basis for over 6 months, as we do in the lead up to every election, certainly to get enough cases so that we can look at what's going on in micro-regions. So unlike a lot of our competitors, they'd have maybe 200 cases a week. They'd roll it up every month. They were doing 300 cases a day, so I provided a lot more agility in terms of being able to see any transient responses or shifts. There was a lot of skepticism, including a lot of people who said Graves is making this up. This is like an attempt to manipulate voters. Okay, so I'm going to unpack that a little bit. That he's just saying that they're tracking it day to day. They're tracking the polling, the micro polling, basically, where they go and they actually talk to people and they ask them and all that, as opposed to these giant aggregate polls that they take. But I like what he said at the end there. He said, I think he said the quiet part out loud. Graves is making this shit up. He's this stuff up. It's like an attempt to manipulate voters. I think that's what it is. I think that's exactly what's happening. I think they're just doing that thing where they say, oh, you know what? you got to believe this. This is what people are saying and doing. Everybody I talk to are voting for the conservatives. So, and I know people that are liberals that are normally liberals and they're voting for conservatives. I, in fact, I hate admitting this, but I've admitted it before on the podcast. This will be the first cycle I voted. I've never voted before because I just didn't see a point. In Canada, it was just kind of like more of the same, either party, right? One party cuts a bunch of shit, the other party spends a bunch of shit. But until COVID, it was like there was, it was kind of like just whatever, right? It didn't matter. It was left of center, right of center, and it didn't kind of matter who was in government. They just, one did one thing, one undid the other, and it was, we just kept moving along. But now, since COVID, it was like, shit, we got to get rid of this liberal party. We got to get rid of these communists, basically, in our government. And so that's when I decided it's about time that I vote. And I know a lot of people that are the same boat as me, where they're actually deciding to vote for the first time. So I don't believe this. I just don't believe it. I don't know where these numbers are coming from, unless there's like, millions of boomers and whatever's before boomers, all still living, and they're going to vote liberal. I just don't see it happening. I don't see it being a landslide victory for the conservatives anymore, but I see it being a minority government for the conservatives. I don't know. That's just my prediction. You heard it here. If I'm wrong, shit, I got to move because, I'm not living through I don't want to live through another shitty fucking liberal government. 10 years is enough. I'm not going to read any more of this. Honestly, this just keeps going. This is all the questions he was asking that they were asking. The interviewers were asking. It's more of the same. He's just talking about what he thinks, why he thinks that the liberals are doing so much better. He thinks that Carney's a fresh face, and that people think that, this is his assertion, is that people think that Carney's going to be good with the economy. Carney's going to be good with Trump, with the nationalism as far as like protecting Canada as a nation instead of us being the 51st state, which I welcome. And I call bullshit on all that. I don't think he's going to be any good with that kind of stuff, inflation, that kind of thing. I think they're just going to continue to drive us into more and more debt. And at some point, we're going to be risking insolvency like we were back in the 90s. So it's they just keep doing this thing. It's like it's shifting chairs on the deck of the Titanic, right? So I don't see any change as far as what they would do if they were to win, but I don't think they're going to win. I think Poilievre's going to win, and unfortunately, I don't think he's going to win a majority government. So it's really going to kind of handcuff him as to what he can do, and but at least they'll be in, and maybe you can make coalitions with like Garbage NDP or Bloc Québécois or something like that to get some shit done. But we'll see. You heard it here. I think Poilievre's going to win.